It takes approximately 4 to 6 minutes for the human brain to begin dying from lack of oxygen. It takes another 4 to 6 minutes for that damage to become irreversible. After 10 minutes, survival is unlikely. After 15, it's virtually impossible. I know this because I've researched it obsessively for the past 2 years. I know the exact timeline of cellular death, the precise cascade of neurological failure, the clinical sequence of events that transforms a living person into a body. I know all of this because I watched it happen, and I did nothing. My name is Nora Brennan. I'm 29 years old, and 2 years ago, I sat in a room with my older brother while he overdosed on heroin, and I made the conscious decision not to call 911. I watched him convulse. I watched him turn blue. I watched the light leave his eyes. Then I waited 11 minutes before I picked up the phone. 11 minutes, long enough to ensure that whatever happened, there would be no coming back. Long enough to guarantee that the nightmare that had been my childhood would finally, permanently end. Have you ever wished someone dead? Not in the casual way we all do sometimes, not the fleeting frustration of traffic or the momentary anger at a difficult coworker. I mean, really, truly wished for someone's death, imagined it, hoped for it, prayed for it, even if you don't believe in God. If you have, you might understand the person I was in that room. If you haven't, you might not be able to understand anything I'm about to tell you. Either way, I need you to hear it. Drop your answer in the comments. I need to know if I'm alone in this particular darkness. I'm not writing this confession to ask for forgiveness. I'm not sure forgiveness is possible for what I did, or rather, what I didn't do. I'm writing this because the weight of carrying this secret alone has become unbearable, and I need someone, somewhere, to know the truth. Not the truth that everyone else believes, that I was a traumatized little sister who found her brother too late, who did everything she could but couldn't save him. That's the story I told the paramedics, the police, my family, myself. That's the lie I've been living for 2 years. The truth is darker, more complicated, and it starts long before that night in my brother's apartment. To understand why I let Marcus die, you need to understand what Marcus did to me. You need to understand 18 years of silence. Marcus Brennan was 4 years older than me, and from the moment I was born, he was everything I was not: charming, athletic, effortlessly successful. He was the kind of person who walked into rooms and made them brighter, who collected friends and achievements the way other people collect stamps. He was captain of the football team, homecoming king, valedictorian. He got a full scholarship to a prestigious university and graduated with honors. Everyone who met him loved him instantly. Our parents worshipped him. Not in the quiet, steady way that good parents love all their children, but with a fervent, almost religious devotion. Marcus was their miracle, their proof that they'd done something right. Every report card went on the refrigerator. Every trophy got its own shelf. Every accomplishment was announced to relatives, neighbors, strangers at the grocery store. I was the afterthought. The accident, my mother called me once when she thought I couldn't hear. The unexpected addition to a family that had already achieved its perfect composition. I was quiet where Marcus was loud, awkward where he was graceful, forgettable where he was unforgettable. I learned early that there was no point competing for my parents' attention. Marcus had claimed it all, and there was nothing left for me. So I made myself small. I stayed in my room, read books, disappeared into worlds where I didn't have to be Nora Brennan, Marcus's lesser sister. I became expert at going unnoticed, at sliding through rooms without leaving an impression. It was a survival skill. I just didn't know yet what I was surviving. The first time Marcus came into my room at night, I was 8 years old. I'm not going to describe what happened. If you've lived through something like this, you already know. If you haven't, the details won't help you understand. They'll just be prurient, voyeuristic, a way of consuming someone else's trauma for entertainment. What I'll tell you is this: it happened for 10 years, from the time I was 8 until I was 18, and finally able to leave that house. Hundreds of times, hundreds of nights lying in the dark, waiting, listening for footsteps in the hallway. Hundreds of mornings pretending nothing had happened, watching Marcus eat breakfast and joke with our parents while I sat across the table, trying not to exist. I told my mother once. I was 11. I'd finally found the words, finally worked up the courage to say them out loud. I waited until Marcus was at football practice and my father was at work, and I sat my mother down at the kitchen table and told her what her golden boy had been doing to her forgotten daughter. She listened. Her face didn't change. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Nora, your brother loves you. Sometimes you misunderstand affection. I don't want to hear lies like this again." She stood up, walked to the sink, and started washing dishes. The conversation was over. The subject was never mentioned again. I learned something important that day. I was alone. Whatever happened to me, whatever Marcus did, I would have to survive it by myself. No one was coming to save me. No one would even believe me if I asked. So I stopped asking. I turned inward, built walls so high and thick that nothing could get through. Not the abuse, not the loneliness, not the crushing weight of being erased by my own family. I became a fortress, and inside that fortress was a girl who was slowly, methodically learning to hate. Not just Marcus, myself too, because some part of me believed what my mother implied, that I was misunderstanding, misremembering, making something out of nothing. That if this were really happening, someone would have noticed, someone would have cared. The fact that no one did meant that either it wasn't real or I wasn't worth protecting. Both options led to the same conclusion: I was worthless. I carried that belief for years, through high school, through college, through a series of failed relationships with men I chose specifically because they would confirm my worst suspicions about myself. I built a life that looked functional from the outside: job, apartment, social circle, while inside I was still that 8-year-old girl, lying in the dark, waiting for footsteps. And then, 2 years ago, I got a phone call. Marcus had been struggling, my father said. Lost his job, got divorced, started using. He needed help. He needed family. He needed me. I hadn't spoken to Marcus in 6 years. After I left for college at 18, I'd constructed careful boundaries. Holiday visits only, and even those I kept short. I never stayed overnight at my parents' house. I never allowed myself to be alone with my brother. I communicated through brief texts and shorter phone calls, maintaining the minimum contact necessary to preserve the fiction of a functional family relationship. Marcus, for his part, had moved on to a life that didn't require my participation. He married a woman named Jennifer, beautiful, accomplished, the perfect complement to his perfect image. He got a job in finance that paid obscenely well. He bought a house in the suburbs and sent Christmas cards featuring professional photos of his photogenic family. From the outside, his life was everything mine wasn't: successful, stable, complete. I told myself I was happy for him. I told myself the past was the past. I told myself that the man sending those Christmas cards wasn't the same person who had destroyed my childhood. He'd grown up, changed, become someone else. I told myself a lot of lies. The cracks in Marcus's perfect life started showing about 3 years before that final night. Jennifer filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The house was sold. The job, it turned out, had been lost months earlier due to performance issues that were never fully explained. My parents called with updates, their voices heavy with confusion and disappointment. Their golden boy was tarnishing, and they didn't understand why. They speculated about stress, about Jennifer's influence, about the pressures of modern life. They never considered that the rot might have been there all along, hidden beneath the shine. I said the right things, expressed the appropriate concern, but inside I felt something I'm not proud of. Satisfaction. Finally, the universe was delivering some kind of justice. Marcus was losing everything he'd built, and I couldn't help but see it as karma, as the natural consequence of a lifetime of taking what didn't belong to him. I know how that sounds. I know it makes me seem petty, vindictive, small, but you have to understand. I had spent 20 years watching him prosper while I struggled, 20 years seeing him celebrated while I was ignored, 20 years knowing what he really was while everyone else saw only the mask. His suffering felt like validation, proof that the world wasn't as blind as I'd feared. The heroin started about 18 months before the end. My parents discovered it when Marcus showed up at their house, strung out and incoherent, begging for money. They were devastated, their perfect son fallen so far. They staged an intervention. They paid for rehab. They did everything parents are supposed to do when their child is in crisis. They invited me to be part of the process. I declined. I can't, I told my mother on the phone. I have work, I have commitments. I can't just drop everything. All true, all excuses. The real reason was simpler. I didn't want to save Marcus. I didn't want him to get better, to recover, to rebuild his life and resume his position as the family's beloved centerpiece. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the helplessness and despair he had made me feel for 10 years. I wanted him to know what it was like to be destroyed. So I stayed away. I watched from a distance as he cycled through rehab and relapse, through moments of hope and inevitable collapse. I listened to my parents' tearful updates and made sympathetic noises while feeling nothing but cold, patient hatred. And then came the phone call that changed everything. It was my father who called, 6 months before Marcus died. "Nora, I need to ask you something." His voice was strained in a way I'd never heard before. "It's about your brother." "What about him?" "He's getting out of rehab next week, again. But this time, the doctors say he needs a different kind of support, family support, someone who can be there for him day to day, help him stay accountable." I knew where this was going. "Your mother and we're not young anymore, Nora, and we've tried. God knows we've tried, but we're not equipped for this. We don't understand addiction, we don't know how to help him, and honestly," his voice cracked, "honestly, I think we might be part of the problem. He needs distance from us. He needs someone else. Dad, I'm asking you to take him in, just for a few months, just until he gets stable. You live alone, you have that spare room, and he always looked up to you. He talks about you all the time, how proud he is of you, how much he wishes you were closer." I couldn't speak. The audacity of it, of asking me to open my home to the person who had violated it for 10 years, was so staggering that I lost the ability to form words. "I know it's a lot to ask," my father continued. "I know you have your own life, but he's your brother, Nora, and I'm afraid. I'm afraid if he doesn't get real help this time, we're going to lose him." I should have said no. I should have told him the truth right then. The truth about Marcus, about what he did, about why the idea of living with him made me want to scream until my throat bled. But I didn't, because in that moment, another thought surfaced. A darker thought. A thought that had been growing in the shadows of my mind for months, maybe years, waiting for the right opportunity. If Marcus came to live with me, I would be in control. I would be the one with power. I would be able to watch him suffer up close, and maybe, just maybe, I would be able to ensure that his suffering was complete. Okay, I heard myself say, I'll do it. My father started crying, thanking me, telling me I was saving my brother's life, that I was a good sister, that he'd always known I had a generous heart. I let him believe it. 2 weeks later, Marcus moved into my spare bedroom, and the countdown to his death began. The first month was a study in performance. Marcus plays the grateful, recovering addict, humble and apologetic, eager to rebuild the relationships he'd damaged. He cooked dinner, he cleaned the apartment, he attended NA meetings and came home with chips marking his days of sobriety. He was, on the surface, exactly what my father had promised, a man trying desperately to change. I played the supportive sister, patient and encouraging, happy to help my brother through his difficult time. I asked about his meetings, celebrated his small victories, offered reassurance when he seemed to struggle. I was, on the surface, exactly what everyone expected me to be, the family member stepping up when it mattered most. Underneath, we were both lying. I knew Marcus wasn't really sober. I found the hidden stash of pills 2 weeks in, tucked behind books in the spare bedroom. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront him or tell our parents or insist he get help. I just waited. And Marcus knew something was wrong with me, too. I could see it in the way he watched me sometimes, wary, uncertain, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he couldn't quite grasp. He never mentioned the past, never acknowledged what had happened between us, but there were moments when our eyes would meet across the room, and I could see the question forming behind his carefully constructed expression. Does she remember? Does she know? Is that why she's really here? I wanted him to wonder. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the vigilance I'd lived with for 18 years. The constant awareness that something was wrong, something was dangerous, something was waiting to happen. For the first time in my life, I was the one with power, and I discovered something about myself that I hadn't known. I liked it. The game we played that month was subtle but vicious. He would make comments about our childhood, innocent on the surface, but loaded with private meaning. Remember how we used to play in your room? You always had the best toys. And I would smile and nod, accepting the words at face value, while we both understood their true weight. I started leaving things where he could find them: articles about addiction and relapse, statistics about overdose deaths, a brochure for a grief counseling service, tucked casually into a magazine stack, little reminders of where this road was heading. He started using more. I could see the signs, the pinpoint pupils, the drowsiness, the way he'd disappear into the bathroom for too long. The hidden stash grew. The meetings became less frequent, and I watched. I documented. I waited. Here's where I need to stop and ask you something. At this point, I knew my brother was using again. I knew he was spiraling. I could have told our parents, could have insisted on another intervention, could have done something to change the trajectory. Instead, I chose to watch him fall. Was I wrong? Was I complicit in what happened next? Or was I simply refusing to save someone who had never saved me? Type complicit or justified in the comments. I genuinely need to know how others see this. Because even now, 2 years later, I'm not sure if what I did was monstrous or merely human. 5 months into our cohabitation, Marcus finally broke the silence. It was a Tuesday night. He'd been high for most of the day. I could tell by the way he moved, the glassiness of his eyes, the slight lag between hearing a question and processing it. But something was different this time. There was an agitation beneath the chemical calm, a restlessness that wouldn't settle. "We need to talk," he said, finding me in the kitchen. "About what?" "About this." He gestured vaguely at the space between us. "About whatever's going on. Because something is. I can feel it. You're waiting for something. Watching me. Like you're. He stopped, struggled for the word. Like you're expecting something to happen. I set down my glass of water, kept my face neutral. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. He stepped closer. You've always been smart, Nora. Smarter than anyone gave you credit for. So don't pretend you don't know exactly what I'm talking about. Fine. I met his eyes. What do you think is going on? I think you remember. Everything. And I think you brought me here because of it. The air in the kitchen changed, became heavier, charged with something that had been building for 20 years. So you do remember, I said softly. I wondered sometimes if you'd somehow convinced yourself it never happened, if you'd edited your own history the way you tried to edit mine. Nora, don't. Don't say my name like that, like we're having a normal conversation. There's nothing normal about any of it. There's nothing normal about any of it. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. His facade was cracking, the charming mask slipping to reveal something rawer underneath. I was a kid too, he said. I was fucked up. Our family was fucked up. I'm not making excuses. I'm just. You were 16 when it started. 16, Marcus. I was 8. I know. You came into my room for 10 years. 10 years. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? What it did to me? I know, he said again, quieter now. I know. And I've spent every day since then trying to outrun it, to be someone else, someone better. That's why I worked so hard, why I built that life. I was trying to prove that I wasn't a monster. You failed. He flinched like I'd hit him. The drugs, I continued, my voice cold and steady. The divorce, the lost job, the spiral. You thought you could escape what you did by becoming successful, but it caught up with you anyway. The rot was always there, Marcus. You just ran out of ways to hide it. Is that why you took me in? His voice was barely a whisper. To watch me fall apart? To see me punished? I considered lying, considered maintaining the fiction of the supportive sister for a little longer. Instead, I told him the truth. Yes, the word hung between us. I've been waiting for this for 20 years, I said. Not actively planning, not scheming, just waiting, knowing that someday, somehow, you would destroy yourself. And I wanted to be there when it happened. I wanted to watch. Marcus sank into a kitchen chair, his face gray. I deserve that, he said. I know I deserve it. But Nora, I'm trying. I'm really trying to get better. Not for me. I don't care about me anymore. But I have to believe that people can change, that what we did doesn't have to define us forever. What you did, I corrected. What you. I didn't do anything except survive. You're right, you're right. He was crying now, tears cutting tracks through the sweat on his face. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything. I know it can't fix anything. But I'm sorry. For all of it. For everything. I looked at my brother, this broken, weeping man who had been the architect of my greatest pain, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not compassion, something more like clarity. Sorry isn't enough, I said. It will never be enough. But you're right about one thing. You're trying. So I'm going to give you a choice. He looked up, hope flickering in his bloodshot eyes. You can keep trying. Really try. Get clean. Get help. Face what you did, not just to me, but to yourself. Become a different person. It won't erase the past, but it might be worth something. Or you can keep using, keep running, keep hiding from what you are until it finally catches up with you. And if I choose wrong? I held his gaze. Then I'll be here when it ends, watching, just like I've always been. For 2 weeks after our confrontation, Marcus tried. He started attending meetings again, really attending, not just showing up for chips. He found a sponsor. He began writing in a journal, trying to process the past he'd spent decades fleeing. He was raw and struggling, and sometimes he would lock himself in his room, and I would hear sounds through the door that might have been crying, or might have been something else. But he was trying. I watched this transformation with mixed feelings. Part of me, a small, quiet part, one didn't like to acknowledge, was relieved. If Marcus could change, if he could face what he'd done and become someone else, then maybe the story didn't have to end the way I'd imagined. Maybe there was a version of this where we both survived. But another part of me, larger, louder, fed by 20 years of pain, was furious. He didn't get to do this. He didn't get to hurt me for a decade and then find redemption. He didn't get to be the hero of his own recovery narrative while I remained trapped in the aftermath of his choices. His suffering was supposed to be the end of the story, not the beginning of a new chapter. I started undermining his recovery in small ways. Nothing overt, nothing that would look like sabotage if anyone examined it closely. I just stopped being supportive, stopped asking about his meetings, started leaving alcohol visible in the apartment, then switching to something harder, a bottle of prescription painkillers I'd been saving, left carelessly on the bathroom counter. I told myself I was testing him, that if he was really committed to recovery, he'd resist these temptations, that I was just seeing how strong his resolve really was. But I knew the truth. I was trying to push him back into the darkness, because watching him claw his way toward the light felt like losing. After 2 weeks of sobriety, he relapsed. I came home from work to find him on the couch, barely conscious, a needle still hanging from his arm. The hidden stash I'd discovered months ago had been replenished, had probably been replenished multiple times without my knowledge. For a moment, I stood in the doorway and looked at him, at this shell of a man who had once seemed so powerful, so untouchable, at the body that had violated mine so many times, now slack and helpless. I could have called 911 right then. Should have. That's what a normal person would do. A person who hadn't been broken and reshaped by 18 years of abuse. Instead, I walked past him to my bedroom, closed the door, and went to sleep. He was still breathing when I woke up the next morning, unconscious, pale, but alive. I made myself breakfast and went to work. We never talked about that night, but something between us changed. The fragile hope that had started to build during his 2 weeks of trying, it was gone. We both knew now how this story was going to end. It was just a matter of time. The night Marcus died started like any other. I came home from work at 6. He was in his room. I could hear music playing through the door, something melancholy and acoustic. I made dinner, ate alone, watched television without really seeing it. Around 9, I heard him moving around. The bathroom door opened and closed, water running. Then silence. I should have checked on him. That's what the voice in my head kept saying. The small, moral voice that had grown quieter and quieter over the months of our cohabitation. Check on him. Make sure he's okay. I turned up the volume on the television. At 9:47, I heard a sound from the bathroom, a thump, like something heavy hitting the floor. I didn't move. At 9:52, I heard what might have been choking, gasping, the sounds a body makes when it's fighting for oxygen it can't get. I still didn't move. At 10:03, I finally stood up and walked to the bathroom door. I knew, before I opened it, what I would find. I knew, and I opened the door anyway, because some part of me needed to see it, needed to witness the moment I'd been waiting for since I was 8 years old. Marcus was on the floor, his body convulsing, foam at the corners of his mouth. His eyes were open but unfocused, seeing something far beyond that small bathroom. His face was already starting to turn blue. I stood in the doorway and I watched. I watched as the convulsions slowed, as his breathing became labored, irregular, desperate, as his body fought to survive and gradually, inevitably, began to lose. I thought about calling for help. The phone was in my pocket. One call, one sentence, and paramedics would be here in minutes. They might save him. They might bring him back from the edge. I thought about 8-year-old Nora, lying in bed, listening to footsteps in the hallway. I thought about 11-year-old Nora, watching her mother wash dishes while her world collapsed. I thought about 18 years of silence, of shame, of being erased. And I made a choice. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub and I watched my brother die. It took 11 minutes from the time I opened that door until his body finally went still. 11 minutes of bearing witness to the end of a life I had once, in a different world, a different family, loved. When it was over, when I was certain there was no coming back, I pulled out my phone and called 911. "My brother," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I think he's overdosed. I don't think he's breathing. Please, you have to help him." They told me to start CPR. I did, or pretended to, going through the motions for the sake of the recording, knowing it was far too late to make any difference. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. They worked on him for another 15, but it was hopeless. He'd been gone too long. The damage was done. I stood in the corner of my bathroom and watched them pronounce my brother dead. And I felt nothing, just emptiness where the hatred used to be. The official cause of death was acute heroin overdose. No one suspected anything. Why would they? I was the devoted sister who had taken in her troubled brother, who had tried her best to help him recover, who had discovered his body and done everything she could to save him. The 911 recording captured my panicked voice, my desperate attempts at CPR, my grief when the paramedics gave up. I played the part perfectly, because I'd been playing parts my whole life, and this one came naturally. The funeral was 3 days later. My parents were destroyed, their golden boy, finally and permanently gone. My mother cried so hard she had to be sedated. My father aged 10 years in a single afternoon, his face collapsing into grief he'd never escape. I stood beside them, accepting condolences, wearing black, saying all the right things. Inside, I was somewhere else entirely, somewhere cold and quiet where the noise of mourning couldn't reach. People kept telling me how strong I was, how brave, how selfless I'd been to take Marcus in, to try to save him. They called me a good sister, if they only knew. The guilt didn't come immediately. For the first few weeks, I felt nothing but relief, the same relief I'd felt at 18 when I finally left my parents' house. The nightmare was over. I was free. But guilt has a way of finding you. It seeps in through the cracks, fills the spaces you thought were empty, grows until it's impossible to ignore. It started with nightmares. Marcus's face, blue and contorted, eyes open and staring. His body on the bathroom floor, convulsing, fighting to live. The 11 minutes, I'd sat there watching, doing nothing while my brother died. Then came the flashbacks. Random moments during the day when I'd suddenly be back in that bathroom, smelling the vomit and chemical sweat, hearing the sounds of a body failing. I'd lose minutes, sometimes hours, trapped in the memory of what I'd done. Or rather, what I hadn't done. Because that's the thing about my crime. It wasn't an action. I didn't kill Marcus. The heroin did that. I didn't inject him, didn't buy the drugs, didn't push him toward addiction. All I did was not help. All I did was let nature take its course. But in those 11 minutes, sitting on the edge of that bathtub while my brother gasped for air he couldn't get, I made a choice. I chose to let him die. I chose revenge over mercy, justice over compassion, my pain over his life. And that choice, that deliberate, conscious decision, haunts me in ways I didn't anticipate. Here's what I've learned about guilt. It doesn't care whether you were justified. It doesn't weigh your suffering against your victims. It just exists, growing inside you, demanding to be acknowledged. I was right to hate Marcus. I was right to want him to suffer. But I wasn't right to let him die. Those two truths exist together, irreconcilable, tearing me apart from the inside. And there's something else, something I didn't discover until after the funeral, something that changed everything I thought I knew about that night. 3 months after Marcus died, I found a letter. It was hidden in his room, tucked between the mattress and the box spring, the same place I used to hide things when I was a child. I only found it because I was finally clearing out his belongings, donating his clothes, erasing the last traces of his presence from my apartment. The envelope had my name on it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Marcus's handwriting. Nora, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead. I've known for a while that this is how it ends. I've made peace with it. I want you to know that I understand. I understand why you did what you did, or didn't do, I guess. I saw it in your eyes that night in the kitchen when we finally talked about the truth. You've been waiting for this moment for 20 years. You deserved to see it through. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did to you was unforgivable. I knew it then, and I know it now, even if I spent 2 decades pretending otherwise. I'm writing because there's something else you need to know, something I should have told you years ago. Mom knew. She always knew. Not because you told her, although you did, and she chose not to believe you, but because she saw it herself. Once, when I was 17, she walked in on us, on me. She saw exactly what was happening. She didn't stop me. She didn't report it. She closed the door and walked away, and she never mentioned it again. I think, in her mind, acknowledging it would have meant admitting that her perfect son was a monster, and she couldn't do that, couldn't shatter the image she'd built of me, of our family, of her own success as a mother. So she chose to unsee it, to let you suffer rather than face the truth. I'm telling you this not to excuse what I did, nothing excuses it, but because you deserve to know you weren't alone in being failed. Our whole family failed you. Mom, Dad, me. Everyone who should have protected you chose something else instead. I hope you can find peace someday. I hope you can build a life that isn't defined by what I did to you. I hope you can be happy. I know I never will be, but that's okay. Some debts can't be repaid. I'm sorry, Nora, for everything. Marcus. I read the letter 3 times before I could breathe again. My mother knew. She'd known all along. Not just from my confession at 11, she'd witnessed it herself and chosen to do nothing, chosen to protect her image of Marcus over my actual living body. The implications crashed over me in waves. All those years of doubting myself, of wondering if I'd misunderstood or misremembered or somehow been wrong. She could have validated me at any time, could have intervened, could have saved me years of additional abuse. She chose not to. And Marcus, in his final days, facing his own death, had chosen to tell me, had chosen to give me this terrible gift of truth, knowing what it would mean for my relationship with our mother. I sat in his empty room, holding the letter, and I felt something I hadn't felt since the night he died. I cried. Not for Marcus, not exactly, but for all of it. The abuse, the silence, the complicity of everyone who should have protected me. For the 8-year-old girl who had deserved so much better. For the 11-year-old who had tried to tell the truth and been told she was lying. For the woman who had become hard and cold and full of revenge because it was the only way to survive. I cried for everything I'd lost, and I cried because I finally understood. My mother was as guilty as Marcus, more guilty in some ways. She was the adult who could have stopped it and chose not to. Marcus had been a monster, but she had made that monster possible. That was 2 years ago. I haven't spoken to my mother since I found the letter. I sent her a copy with no explanation, no context, just the evidence of her complicity in black and white. She's tried to contact me, calls, emails, letters, but I've ignored them all. Some relationships can't be repaired. Some betrayals are too complete. My father doesn't know the truth. Maybe someday I'll tell him. Or maybe I'll let him live out his remaining years without knowing what his wife and son really were. I haven't decided yet. As for my guilt, it's still there. I still have nightmares about those 11 minutes. I still question whether I did the right thing, whether anyone has the right to let another person die, whether my suffering justified my choice. But I've come to understand something. There is no clean answer. No resolution that makes everything okay. I was a victim who became, in some ways, a perpetrator. I was wronged, and I responded with wrongness of my own. Both things are true. They exist together, uncomfortable and irreconcilable, like most true things in life. I'm in therapy now, real therapy, not the performative kind I'd done before. I'm learning to live with complexity, with ambiguity, with the parts of myself I'd rather not see. I'm learning that being damaged doesn't make me irredeemable, but it also doesn't excuse everything I do. I'm learning to forgive myself without forgetting what I did. It's slow work, hard work. Some days I don't think I'll ever get there, but I'm trying. That has to count for something. So that's my story. The whole truth, from beginning to end. I watched my brother die because he had spent 10 years destroying my childhood, and I don't know if that makes me a murderer or a survivor or something in between. I need to hear from you. Have you ever been so hurt by someone that you lost the capacity to feel compassion for them? Have you ever faced a choice between saving someone who harmed you and letting them face the consequences of their own actions? I'm not asking for permission to feel okay about what I did. I'm not sure that's possible. I'm asking because I need to know if this kind of moral complexity exists in other people's lives, or if I'm alone in this particular darkness. And here's the question that haunts me most. If you had been in that bathroom, knowing what I knew, carrying what I'd carried, would you have called for help? Type call or watch in the comments. And be honest, not about what you think you should do, but about what you actually would do if the person dying in front of you was the person who had hurt you most in this world. I'll read every answer. And maybe, somewhere in all those responses, I'll find something that helps me make peace with the person I've become. Or maybe not. Maybe some questions don't have answers. Maybe that's just what it means to be human.